I saw you give a speech at the UN as well. I follow you on X. I love your anti-imperialist work. First time we actually met, talking face to face. So welcome to RBN, Chay's Bowles.
Hey guys, thanks for asking me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I was following over the last day or so was the absolute cringe that was D-Day. So you had all these Western countries with Ukraine celebrating D-Day and pretending like there was the ones who defeated the Nazis. And I found it very hilarious because you had Zelensky, someone who is allied with neo-Nazis in Ukraine, now celebrating with the West while they banned Russia from this event when Russia was the country who defeated the Nazis, and they are the country that are currently fighting the newest iteration of the Nazis. And I want to get your thoughts on this, Chay, but I saw this absolute cringe. I want you to reply to this as well, because you had Zelensky who met a D-Day veteran, and in this moment, the liberal media essentially they love this. They blew this up. And they spread it everywhere. Look at this cringe. A guy who is literally leading a neo-Nazi movement, celebrating with D-Day veterans. Look at Prime Minister is busy claiming right now.
No. Oh, you're the savior of the people. Here's my eye.
I'm about to vomit. So, Chay, I want to get you in here.
I don't think this old dude knows who he's shaking the hand of right now. That's my first view. But something that's interesting that people are watching, and hello, everybody, is that Zelensky's grandfather, I'm living in Russia right now. I first came to Russia in 2015, just after the Maidan coup, the CIA coup, which overthrew the democratically elected government there, which kicked off this entire shit show here, this conflict. Zelensky's own grandfather fought in the Red Army. He was a devout soldier of the Red Army, the great Red Army that destroyed fascism, ending in 1945. And between 1941 and 45, of course, 27 million people from the then Soviet Union, 65% of them were Russian, gave their lives in this war against this fascist threat. What did that look like? This was the biggest army that was ever assembled in the history of humanity, ever on Earth, invaded the Soviet Union. And of course, you'll hear people saying, "Oh, well, the Russians did a deal with the Germans, and et cetera, and this was all, they were complicit in the invasion of Poland." It's all bullshit. The Poles actually did a deal with the Nazis in 1935, the Pilsudski Agreement, which actually allowed Poland to steal part of Czech lands as well, which is something you don't hear about. So this whole narrative you hear now that Russia is an imperialist state, it's all insane fantasy. Yeah. But it's important when you look at Zelensky. There's a very famous photograph of him visiting his grandfather's grave. I wonder how his grandfather would feel. I wonder how the 7 million Ukrainians who died defeating the Nazi war machine. And remember, it was the Red Army who weren't represented in Normandy. And I've been to Normandy. I've been there on D-Day. And I've seen these graveyards. And a lot of great men died fighting the Nazis in Normandy. And that's very important that we recognize that we recognize real history, while the fake client media tries to tell us that the Russians weren't essentially the core of the defeat of Nazis. And we shouldn't do that. We should be magnanimous in remembering the men who died on those beaches, the kids from the United States, the teenagers, the boys from England, the Canadians who died. But in reality, it was the Red Army, 60% of which were Russian, that destroyed 75% of the Wehrmacht's fighting power. And that's how you win a war. You win it by destroying the offensive combat capabilities of your enemy. And it was the Red Army that destroyed 75%. The next thing you're going to hear is, Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease. We gave them the tanks. We gave them the trucks. Without the American trucks and oil and material, they would never do it. Lend-Lease, in the most generous appraisal of what the Russians received from the Americans, accounts for about 6 to 7% maximum in any academic assessment of what the contribution was from America and the British. The British also received huge aid from the United States before the US joined the war against the Axis. Remember, they were happy to sit it out. The Americans, with their huge Zionist influence, their huge non-interventionist view, they didn't care about Europe. They didn't care that Britain was fighting alone. They didn't want to join the war. They joined when the Japanese attacked them. So remember that. This wasn't some, this wasn't, it's like the Beyonce song. Don't tell me you're sorry because you're not. You're only sorry because you got caught.
Yeah.
They only joined the war because the Japanese, who are now, by the way, their number one ally in the Pacific, in the South China Sea. The clues in the name. What is an American aircraft carrier group doing in the South China Sea? The clues in the name. Like, why are you there? But Japan, the only country on earth ever attacked with nuclear weapons. And guess who fired those nuclear weapons at a civilian population? It wasn't Russia, wasn't China, wasn't Iran, wasn't the Africans, wasn't the blacks, wasn't the Muslims, wasn't all those bogeymen. It was Washington. It was Washington that bombed and massacred hundreds of thousands of civilians in order to demonstrate to the world the new world order is coming. The war is going to end. The Japanese army was already defeated. Most objective analysts would suggest that. The war was over. This was a demonstration to the Soviet Union, to their vassal powers in Europe, that we've got this weapon. And the only way to demonstrate that wasn't by whispers and intimation, was to drop it. Not once, drop it twice. Now, it ended the war, but it also set the stage for a phase of global hegemony from the United States, predicated on its dollar, predicated on its economic power and its new military power. The only counterbalance to that, of course, was the Soviet Union. So when you see Zelensky, this hollowed out client, this absolute actor, he's an actor. He's a very good actor, by the way. I mean, I don't know if the guys watch and understand. Zelensky starred in a TV show in Ukraine called A Servant of the People, which was produced by his company called Kvartal 95. And Kvartal 95 was backed by a guy called Igor Koiminski, who was actually wanted by the US State Department for gross corruption. Koiminski promoted Zelensky, funded his TV company. Kvartal 95 means Sector 95. It was formed by Zelensky and a group of his mates who now form the core of the Ukrainian elite and cabinet, by the way, as well. Nothing corrupt in that, you'd say. Of course not. That's all completely normal. That a guy who imitated having power in a TV show, that the people in Ukraine were so desperate to elect this guy. And they elected him by a margin of over 70% of the people Ukraine elected. And they elected him because he said two things. He said he's going to bring an end to corruption and he's going to end the war, which was the most important thing to the people of Ukraine. Now, that was in 2019. In 2023, over 22%, maybe 25% in real terms of Ukrainian territory is occupied by Russia. Probably around 500,000 or 600,000 people have died. Corruption is endemically higher, much higher than it was in 2019. A big proportion of his country now is owned by companies like BlackRock. It's completely eaten from the inside out by the intelligence services of Britain, United States. And Zelensky is now a completely powerless dictator. He has his mandate as president has passed. And it took Vladimir Putin actually had to say, well, this guy doesn't even have the right to negotiate us. Even if he hadn't banned peace. Remember, the people waving the Ukrainian flags in their profiles need to listen to this. Vladimir Zelensky, and Vladimir Zelensky is his name, not Volodymyr. I mean, this is bullshit. This Vladimir shit. This is utter bullshit. He called himself Vladimir all his life. He had to learn Ukrainian and he speaks it very badly. This is a dude pretending to be something he's not. And he's doing that because of the disproportional effect of radical, ultra-nationalist Nazis on his government. The same people who warned him not to sign a peace deal with Russia, same people who warned him about any perception of peace. Peace is a dirty word in Ukraine. And Boris Johnson's also complicit in that. So you're dealing with a fake. You're dealing with a fake man who's in a corner, who has no actual sovereign power, who's happy to be, complicit in vast corruption. Now, the US State Department for almost a decade has called Ukraine one of the most endemically corrupt countries on earth. I'd urge the viewers and our listeners, wherever you guys are, go to the State Department and check out the report on Ukraine. And when you read through the stuff that it's all Russia's fault, you'll see that Russia is far less corrupt when it comes to judiciary, functionality, economy. Ukraine is the center of human trafficking. Over 300,000 women and children have been trafficked through Ukraine. And that's according to USAID. And USAID is a cutout for the CIA, just like, most of the NGOs working in parts of Europe are. They say this. They also say that the judiciary, the police, extrajudicial killings, abductions, gross, stealing from the state coffers. Probably 20% of the money, the cash that's gone to Ukraine has been stolen. We know that. A lot of the weapons have been stolen. We had the Spanish police a week ago saying, you're going to have to do something about these automatic weapons turning up in Gibraltar. All the drug dealers have all these high-tech body armor kits. They have these US-made assault rifles, and they're coming from Ukraine. This is the Spanish police saying this. There was a kid shot in Dublin about a month and a half ago with an American AR-15, which came from Ukraine. A kid shot dead in a car in a drug shootout. So Zelensky isn't in charge. So anyone thinks he is, wake up and smell the coffee. The Americans and probably the British more aggressively are the ones in charge. They're the real. That's the real deal. So when Zelensky turns up at the Normandy beaches, right, and represents something. What he represents are the 7 million Ukrainians who died fighting the fascist Nazis that he now supports tacitly. That's what he's representing. So there is a Soviet representative at the D-Day landings, and his name is Vladimir Zelensky, whose grandfather fought the Nazis. Actually ended up in Berlin. Okay, his grandfather, this dude. Okay, so you also had at this commemoration, you didn't have the Russians, okay, which traditionally would have been there. Guess who you did have there? Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Deutschland. Can you believe this? Olaf Scholz is at the commemoration for the D-Day landings, where thousands of American kids, Canadians, and British boys died, were mown down by the Germans. Who turns up? Olaf Scholz. Which ally is he representing? Exactly. I mean, it's a fantasy narrative.
They're rewriting history.
It shows how the Western media, this client media, this remarkably corrupt media, how it can massage reality, how it can manipulate truth, and how, this central snowball is rolled in Washington and in London, and it's thrown by the client press, the client media. And that's why platforms like yours are so important. And it's so important that we keep telling people what's actually happening. This is a giant theater, a theater where the script is written in Langley, in London, and it's about manipulating the reality, manipulating truth. And that's what this whole show is about. The whole thing about Normandy is forget about the geostrategic reality of Normandy. And by the way, I'd like to say something. As somebody who studied, strategic studies, I have a master's degree in it. And I spent a bit of time in the military myself. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that on the 6th of June, the Allied carpet bombing destroyed about 700 French villages and towns. But during the Battle of Normandy, the Americans and British killed more French civilians, 60,000 of them, men, women, children, babies, hospitals, clinics, bakeries, cafes. 60,000 French civilians were killed by the Americans, the British, in the invasion of Normandy, which is twice the amount of French civilians that were killed by the Nazi occupation. Let's not talk about that. That's not a popular point. Let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
So this is like the same reality that you can't have a Jewish president. There's no Nazis in Ukraine because Zelensky is Jewish, right? There can't be any Nazi. That's like saying there's no racism in the States because Obama was black.
Yeah. That's always my comeback. I'm glad you said that because that was always my first comeback.
I mean, it's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's complete bullshit. So the reality of the whole D-Day thing, it's actually interesting that they're stupid enough to sort of use it as a chapter in their propaganda war, because anybody who wants to actually see what D-Day was a front in the war which the Soviets begged the Allies to open again and again and again. But just like Ukraine, just like they're happy to use Ukrainian people as fodder to fight the Russians, to try and destabilize Russia, to inflict this strategic victory on Russia, which it doesn't exist. It hasn't happened. It's a gross failure for Europe, the United States, for the whole Western cabal. It's a failure. Just like now, back then, they were happy to let the Soviets, the Russians, and the 15 Soviet republics who contributed to this massive effort to destroy Nazism. They were happy to let them take on the Nazis, to destroy their combat effectiveness. They were happy to step back. Only in 1944 did the Allies decide to open the front. Why wait so long? Maybe because the Soviets had destroyed the combat capabilities of the Nazis. Nobody can take that away from them here. Every year here I go on May 9th and I go down to Red Square. I'm lucky this year I was on Red Square. I reported on it. This is a source of immense pride. It's a sort of defining element of the Russian ideology, the Russian psyche, is the Great Patriotic War. This massive victory. Forget about the crimes of Stalin.
They lost so many people too.
The 27 million people. Now, of course, Stalin did terrible things. I mean, this was a terrible period. There were terrible times in the communist period, and as there are in most civilizations, terrible. The American army, by the way, has killed 12 million people since the end of the Second World War. Well, let's not fucking talk about that either.
That's why history always started at Hitler for them. Whenever they talk about evil people, they talk about Hitler, because if they talk about modern history, you had to talk about Henry Kissinger.
Yeah, let's not talk about the fact that the two greatest evil empires on earth, the greatest corporate criminals and mass murderers in history, is the British Empire, who very eagerly handed off the baton to their ex-colony, the United States, who took it up after the Second World War. Not because they wanted to give up being king of the evil empires list. It's because the United States, after the Suez Crisis, where Israel, France, and Britain conspired to invade Egypt to illegally take control over the Suez Canal, which is a completely other show if you want to do it. And the United States stepped in with the Soviet Union and said, now sit down, we're going to take it from here. That was the end of Britain as a great imperial power. And same with France. So the reality of what's happened on this global chessboard is quite simple if you actually zoom out from it and you kind of you tune into what the motivations are. And of course, as usual, the motivations are profit, power, control, and influence. The Americans don't care about the Ukrainians. They don't give a shit about them. The British don't care about Ukrainians. They're a giant pain in the ass. That's all it is. It's a huge suck on resources and economy. What they care about is trying to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, which has completely caved in now. The idea of separating Europe, the industrial engine of Europe, the Germans, from cheap Russian energy has been achieved by the United States. Remember, when the Marshall Plan was developed by the Americans after the destruction of Nazi Germany, essentially by the Russians to a great extent, the idea of the Marshall Plan to rebuild Germany was based on keep the Germans down, keep the Russians out, and keep the Americans in. And now America has 800 military bases across the world. About 130 around the European continent, most of them in Asia Pacific, all over the world. Why do the good guys need so many military bases? Why do the good guys need so many guns? Why does the most peaceful town in the state need so many cops with machine guns? What is that for? And what you very correctly say, these go-to blame me sort of subjects like immigration, like sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, all destroyed by post-colonial hegemony, all destroyed by the predation. It's destroyed.
Go ahead.
The only reason I don't want to get in a boat and come from the Sahel across the Mediterranean with my 4 kids, spend my life savings to come and stay in a basically a concentration camp in Britain. I don't want to do that. The Irish didn't want to leave Ireland after the Great Famine, which was essentially a genocide by the British. The British exported more wheat, butter, oats, and produce, food from Ireland in the 4 years of our great catastrophe, the Great Famine, than they did in the previous 4 years, the 4 years after. This was a genocide of control. We didn't want to have to leave our countries, our farms, our families, our culture, our language, our heritage, and go to America, which we had to do in our millions. We were driven there by British imperialism. And then, you know, a lot of my countrymen became very eager, you know, cogs in the wheel of imperialism themselves.
A tale as old as time. That's a tale as old as time, but go ahead.
Yeah. You know what I mean? This is the reality. So many realities, all stemming back to this thing in D-Day, that we poured off the landing craft to liberate Europe, to save Europe. The Americans still occupy. The United States military still occupies Germany. It occupies Japan. It occupies most of its post Second World War vassal states. It does that for what? Imagine being Japanese and after being nuked twice. Now Japan is essentially a complete. Its nose is parked so far up the ass of the Pentagon. It's absolutely insane. It's insane to me that people can't open their eyes.
Man, you guys know on this show I'm a rant connoisseur. And that's now that was a glorious rant, my friend. And we guys had to leave a dub in the chat for that. I don't know where to start.